Grizzlies podcast. Ja Morant, as had been anticipated but was not necessarily guaranteed, Ja Morant returned to action last night after nearly missing a month for the Memphis Grizzlies. How his return was a bit spoiled due to a lackluster performance by the Grizzlies on the court, but also celebrating Ja Morant at 150 career games and Desmond Bane at 100 games. That and much more on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go. Or as a matter of fact, now, here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, one and all, to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you are having an outstanding start to your Tuesday. Of course, you can find the show at Locked On Grizz, myself at StatsSAC. My name's Shawn Coleman. I'm a credentialed media member with the Grizzlies, have been covering the Grizzlies now for 4 years. Your host here at Locked On Grizzlies, your Grizzlies every day. You can find the podcast wherever it's available: Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Wherever you choose to listen, that's where we will be. And you can find the show, here on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoy the show. Lets others find the show that enjoy the Grizzlies, and also just makes the experience as a whole the best it could possibly be. I want to remind you of our title sponsor for today's show, Truebill.com. It's the holiday season. We all probably love to click on those free subscription trials, but you want to keep those from being hidden costs. Make sure you check out Truebill.com as a way to manage your subscriptions as much as possible. Before we get into the Grizzlies, unfortunately having a second, straight game where it was a lackluster performance, and unfortunately now a 2-game losing streak, which we're not used to seeing. Certainly some unfortunate developments last night when it came to Ja Morant's return to the court after being off nearly a month due to injury, due to his knee, also being in health and safety protocols. And I'm not talking about the results that are on the court. It does seem as if there were some fans in the stands that, had voiced definitely some, unpopular, opinions, and an opinion that not many share when it comes to Ja Morant, suggesting that Ja Morant, continue to sit out, basically that Ja Morant, continue to not play because the feeling is that the Grizzlies are better without Ja Morant. Now, I'll say this before we even get into this. I'm not going to waste much time because this opinion is not shared by many. It's only shared by a few. But unfortunately, that's the opinion that was voiced to Ja Morant, who certainly was not welcoming to those words, and rightfully so. No one can blame Ja Morant at all for not wanting to hear those opinions. I am a firm believer that everybody's opinion should definitely be heard, that everybody should be entitled to their opinion. But if you are of the opinion that the Memphis Grizzlies are better off without Ja Morant, I respectfully would like to point out that in no way, shape, or form is your opinion right. Your opinion is 100% wrong. There is not an argument out there. There is no logical argument that can be made that the Memphis Grizzlies are better without Ja Morant. For one, any numbers that you could point out about the Grizzlies over the past few weeks without Ja Morant, I'll simply go and point out the numbers that the Grizzlies produced with Ja Morant when they beat Steph Curry and the Warriors to get into the playoffs last year, and the numbers that Ja Morant put up against the Utah Jazz in the playoffs. Those numbers with Ja Morant on the court and that he himself put up, they are more important and more significant than any numbers that the Grizzlies have put up during this 10-game win streak out of 12 games, due to quality of opponent, due to the stage that they were on, and just simply due to the fact that the highest ceiling of this Grizzlies team obviously involves the best talent that the Grizzlies have ever had play for their franchise. But even more important than that, the opinions that do matter, more than mine, more than anybody else's, the opinions that do matter are those of the front office, the coaching staff, and the players. And any one of those that are involved with the Grizzlies will tell you in a heartbeat, Ja Morant is their leader. Ja Morant is the best talent that is in this franchise right now, or that ever has been, and that the Grizzlies are at their best with Ja Morant on the court. So again, I know this is an opinion that very, very few actually have, but if you are of the opinion that the Memphis Grizzlies are better without Ja Morant, you could not be more wrong. And for that reason, I just simply feel bad that you're not embracing how special this team is with Ja Morant and how awesome it is that even though they had a lot of success without Ja Morant, the best thing about all of that is how excited we all should be of them now being able to once again play with their franchise leader and the best talent this franchise has ever had. So if you do not feel that the Memphis Grizzlies are better, or if you feel that the Memphis Grizzlies are better without Ja Morant, I simply feel bad for you because your opinion could not be further from the truth. With that being said, one thing that I will say that, is unfortunately the truth is that the Grizzlies unfortunately have now lost 2 straight games, and they did it on Monday night inexplicably. Like I will say when it comes to the Portland game on Sunday, it should have been a game that the Grizzlies lost. But the reason why the Grizzlies lost that game was pretty logical. The Portland Trailblazers had 2 of the 3 best players playing on the court in Norman Powell and Damian Lillard, but the Grizzlies just unfortunately did not have anybody complimenting Dillon Brooks, and that's why Portland was able to beat the Grizzlies on Sunday night. Well, on Monday night, it's hard to understand. Obviously, the thing that stands out is that the Grizzlies did not shoot the ball well. Even though they had a 28-16 lead in the first quarter against the Thunder, the Grizzlies shot 11 of 30 from the field. So obviously they did not shoot the ball well. I agree. That certainly is one reason why they struggled last night. But when it comes to the Grizzlies, they had 17 more shots, 17 offensive rebounds, 21 points off turnovers, and overall had a plus 18 when it came to points in the paint. But one of the reasons why the Grizzlies, unfortunately, was not able to get the job done is because the Thunder were simply the more aggressive team last night. They were more aggressive on defense. They were able to get to the line 15 more times and make 9 more free throws, which was the key difference in the game. And unfortunately, the Grizzlies just did not seem to have it in them last night. And it really, even though they won 10 out of 12, and I mentioned on yesterday's podcast that the fact that they did that, the fact that they had a stretch of games where they won 10 out of 12 games this year, not many other teams are going to do that. So that puts the Grizzlies in a good position moving forward when it comes to the playoffs. But the thing about it is, though, is that, listen, this 2-game winning streak, it in no way, shape, or form negates or takes a significant amount of momentum away from what the Grizzlies did, winning 10 out of 12 previously. But these were 2 games where you would have liked to have at least won one game. Because coming up now, the Grizzlies have a 3 straight games in which 2 of them are going to be against the Warriors as well as the Suns. So, listen, if the Grizzlies were to go out on the West Coast and they were to win, 2 out of their next 3 games, or if they beat the Warriors or the Suns, you're not necessarily disappointed. It's fine. This back-to-back, this 2-game losing streak in and of itself is not anything at all that hopefully will be significant. It's just the simple fact that with the Grizzlies schedule getting a bit tougher to end December, and obviously with some tough stretches they've got coming up in January, and after that when they're going to be on the road, you certainly would have liked to have won one of these games. But the fact that they've won 10 out of 12 previously, it doesn't make you too disappointed at all. The Grizzlies' overall effort, though, certainly does need to improve, and it should in time. They've got 2 days off before they play again on Thursday. But the big thing is that the Grizzlies have got to find that they've got to refine their ability to make shots. Several shots just unfortunately did not fall for the Grizzlies yesterday, but they've got to get back going, not only being able to move the ball around, but also continue to find shots. Their defense, I think, is going to be fine. The defense is going to remain effective, I think, moving forward, especially as long as Dillon and Jaren and others are healthy, and you don't worry about the offense that much at all. There's not much worry to come from this game. There are some times where you just have stretches of your schedule where you just don't play up to par, but it is important for the Grizzlies to take these 2 days, regroup, recharge, what have you, get Ja Morant back fully acclimated to making sure that this offense runs effectively with him obviously now on the court with its highest ceiling possible with him out there on the court. The Grizzlies are going to be just fine. They've got to get the refocus, though, to make sure they can hopefully take advantage of getting one of these games against the Warriors or the Suns, and then this 2-game losing streak has very little significance overall. But the one player that did stand out last night, his name is Desmond Bane. And Desmond Bane actually played his 100th game of his career last night, as well as Ja Morant played his 150th game of his career. We'll celebrate their careers up to this point in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to talk with you real quickly about Truebill. So Truebill, it's a great source. It's a great tool to utilize when it comes to your daily routine. The reason why, it's the holiday season. We all love, myself, my wife, my family, we all love the ability to check out these free ads, right? Whether it be, maybe a cooking ad or something like that. Take a free trial period, check out something that highly interests us. But listen, we don't necessarily want that to turn into a monthly subscription or some type of hidden cost. Well, Truebill.com is a great source to prevent that from happening. What it does is that it allows for you to have a place to store all your subscriptions, and Truebill will remind you or take care of making sure those free trials do not turn into subscription costs. On average, Truebill.com saves its users nearly $720 a month. And the great thing is that if you go to Truebill.com, all you got to do is just enter your subscriptions, and it's not just your free trials. It takes care of your subscriptions as a whole, helping you have a place to where you can store them and keep up with them. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. That's Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to check out Truebill today. So obviously the Memphis Grizzlies have been quite a fun team to bet and wager on this year when it comes to their overall ability to perform. But if you enjoy wagering and betting on sports, I can tell you the number one place for you to go would be betonline.ag with the new and updated website, either through your laptop or mobile device. If you go to betonline.ag right now, you put in the promo code Locked On, you'll get 50% off your first deposit. And the great thing is, whether it's the NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball when it's going on, the NBA, UFC, whatever you choose to bet on, BetOnline is the great place to go. You go to betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way for you to enjoy all your betting success. Obviously, we can't thank you enough for checking out Locked On Grizzlies as your first listen of the day. But unfortunately, over the past few days, the NBA has experienced many cancellations due to all the things that are going on as far as COVID protocols, players entering COVID protocols, so on and so forth. For the latest news around the NBA, check out the Locked On NBA podcast, free where podcasts are available, also on YouTube as your second listen of the day. So last night, despite unfortunately different sources of negativity, you don't want to see happen again, obviously. The thing that I'll say is this, is that last night also was a bit of a momentous occasion, for the Grizzlies roster. Not only did Ja Morant return from his injury, but on the same night, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane played their 150th in the case of Morant and 100th career games in the case of Desmond Bane. And so it's pretty awesome to see, some talents that, we know that Ja Morant is a talent unlike we've ever seen when it comes to the Grizzlies. But Desmond Bane, in only his first 100 games, has also clearly emerged as a talent that has been very rare to see, maybe that the Grizzlies have not seen before in franchise history. I'm not saying that Desmond Bane is a better talent than a Ja Morant or a Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, Mike Conley, so on and so forth. What I am saying, though, is that in terms of the actual type of talent that Desmond Bane is, he may be the best shooter the Grizzlies have ever had. I'll get to that in just a moment. But to tell you how special Ja Morant has been in his time with the Grizzlies, 150 games into his career, there are only 5 players in NBA history who have scored 2,800 or more points, produced 1,000 or more assists, made 150 or more threes, and have through their first 150 career games. Those 5 players are Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Allen Iverson, Damon Stoudemire, and Ja Morant. Of those 5 players, the only player who has a field goal percentage of 45% or higher is Ja Morant. Now, Ja Morant, through his first 100 games, may be the 5th most valuable player on that list. I would say probably he's a bit better than Damon Stoudemire was, 100 games into his career. But that goes to show, in terms of the overall production, just how rare of a talent Ja Morant has been. I'm not saying that he's a top 10 all-time talent through the first 100 games of his career. But what I am saying is that his level of production certainly is special when you consider that he's on the level of those other players that I mentioned. He's not in terms of quality. Ja Morant is not on the level of Luka Doncic. Trae Young, has shown that he is a more impactful player a lot of times. Allen Iverson, obviously himself, was on a different level than Morant, at least up to this point in their careers. But the point that I'm making is this, is the fact that Morant's overall production through the first 150 games of his career puts him in the same conversation in terms of counting statistics as those players. It's significant. And that's why he is such a special talent and the best talent the Grizzlies have ever had. So a certainly exclusive company that Ja Morant is in, again, just 150 games into his career. But he's not the only player who is among very good company when it comes to an early career milestone, and that includes Desmond Bane. Last night, Desmond Bane played the 100th game of his career. And what is so special about it is the fact that over the past month, we have really started to scratch the surface of how special Desmond Bane truly is. Last night, 5 threes, 23 points overall. Desmond Bane, over his past 17 games, there have been 10 occurrences where Desmond Bane has made, 25 points overall. Over his past 17 games, in 10 of those games, Desmond Bane has made 4 more threes. Right now, Desmond Bane is on one of the most impressive shooting stretches we have ever seen a Memphis Grizzlies player experience. Yes, Jaren Jackson Jr., Mike Conley, O.J. Mayo, Mike Miller, though some of those players have experienced similar type success shooting the three over certain stretches, but through over a month's worth of games, when it comes to overall making threes at a consistently elite level, you have not seen this type of stretch of three-point shooting success by a Grizzlies player many times in the history of the franchise. In fact, when it comes to Grizzlies players through their first 100 games of their career in a Grizzlies uniform, there's no other player that has made more threes than Desmond Bane. He has made 204 career threes. That's more than any other Grizzlies player in franchise history. And the big factor is just how much quality as well as accuracy are in Desmond Bane's shots. Consider this. The 3 Grizzlies players who have made the most threes through their first 100 career games are Desmond Bane with 204, O.J. Mayo with 165, and Jaren Jackson Jr. with 161. O.J. Mayo, it took him over 1,500 career three-point attempts for him to reach 1,500 field goal attempts for him to reach 165 threes. Jaren Jackson Jr., it took him over 1,150 field goal attempts to reach 161 threes. Desmond Bane has hit 204 career threes on 932 career field goal attempts. That's what stands out about Desmond Bane. Certainly, that shows that he's not, among the elite scorers that have ever played in the NBA. But I certainly do think you could make the case that Desmond Bane has been one of the most impressive shooters to start out his career in NBA history. For instance, Desmond Bane is only the 6th NBA player to have made 200 or more threes while shooting 40% or better from three over his first 100 career games. The other 5 who have done it, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Duncan Robinson, Vashawn Leonard, and Landry Shamet. And the thing about it is that it's actually the fact that Desmond Bane, the 2 players out of that group who Desmond Bane has a better true shooting percentage than over the first 100 games of his career are Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Again, I'm not suggesting that Desmond Bane is going to be on the level of a Steph Curry or a Klay Thompson. But if you want to talk about a player who truly is on a trajectory of adding value among the most elite shooters in the NBA moving forward, Desmond Bane is on that trajectory. That's how special he is as a talent. And again, we talk about him as a shooting specialist. And if you want to talk about Desmond Bane being an effective shooting specialist at this point in his career, I think that that's a compliment. I think that absolutely is a wonderful development for the career of Desmond Bane. But I still think it falls short of discussing just how effective Bane is not only a shooting specialist, but a scorer overall. Consider this. Of the 36 players in NBA history with 900 or more field goal attempts and 450 or more three-point attempts, talking about players that not only are shooting a significant volume of shots, but also a big part of their overall shot selection is from three. Desmond Bane has the best true shooting percentage of that group. And of those 36 players, there are only two players who had a 45% or better field goal percentage, shot 42% or better from three, and 85% or better from the line. Their names are Steph Curry and Desmond Bane. So I'm throwing out a lot of these very good to historic names when it comes to Desmond Bane to show that he's not going to likely be on the level of those type of players, but to show just how rare it has been in NBA history for a player to have this much success shooting, as well as that developing into overall scoring ability. It's been rare to see as impactful of a skill set when it comes to shooting of a player on Desmond Bane's level in NBA history. But the other thing that stands out is this, is that Desmond Bane's overall impact in the first shooting impact in the first 100 games of his career is not unprecedented. There actually has been a player who has been more impressive, significantly more impressive in the first 100 games of his career. But to show just how impactful Desmond Bane's overall performance has been over the first 100 games of his career, the other thing that stands out is that moving forward, Desmond Bane may actually be one of the most valuable players in the NBA when you consider his contract. I'll explain in just a moment. But before we do that, I also want to talk with you about Boost Mobile. Now, whether it's Ja Morant, whether it's Desmond Bane, every single night, somebody is looking to give the Grizzlies a boost with their performance on the court. And the thing is that, listen, you want to hear about it. You listen to podcasts for the power of knowledge when it comes to the Grizzlies, the NBA, what have you. You switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money. Get 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line and a free 5G phone when you switch, so you can get the latest episodes, all on one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save with Boost Mobile. Disclaimer is that the free phone is limited to new customers and one per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers and coverage not available for everyone or for all phones and networks. See boostmobile.com for details. Can't thank you enough for listening to this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Obviously, tomorrow, with the holiday season here, going to start a bit of a series, a 2-part series this week, talking about a Christmas wish list. What about, a holiday wish list? What about the Grizzlies on an individual level? What about the Grizzlies team as a whole? Going to talk about many players and also many perspectives when it comes to the Grizzlies. We'll look at that on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. So obviously, Desmond Bane, playing his 100th game last night, is something that certainly should be celebrated, especially with how special of a performance Desmond Bane has put on over the past few months, starting off this year. But while Desmond Bane, in my opinion, has had one of the most impressive starts to an NBA career when it comes to shooting, it's not unprecedented. Miami Heat forward Duncan Robinson, Desmond Bane, has made 204 threes with a true shooting percentage of .593 in his first 100 career games. Duncan Robinson made 326 threes in his first 100 games with a true shooting percentage of 67.5%. That is outstanding. No player in his first 100 games has had the shooting impact that Duncan Robinson had. Well, because of that, and because of where Duncan Robinson is, Duncan Robinson's production wasn't right after he had come into the NBA. He had bounced around the league for a little bit of time, played in the G League, and then found a home, certainly in Miami, and absolutely caught fire. 1920 season, 270 made threes. Last year, 250 made threes. Duncan Robinson easily is considered one of the best shooters in the NBA, and he was able to take that and turned it into a 5-year, $90 million extension this offseason, starting this year with the Miami Heat. I'm not necessarily saying that that's an overrated contract. Probably is a bit too much to pay to a shooting specialist, but it makes perfect sense why the Heat did it. In no way, shape, or form is it a deal that should be heavily critiqued, at least right now. But the reason why I think that's significant is while through their first 100 games, Duncan Robinson certainly has had the more significant impact than Desmond Bane. It's a bit eye-opening when you start to consider where they have produced at similar levels over the past 2 years. For instance, Duncan Robinson has made 4.3 field goals on 10 field goal attempts per game since the start of last year. Desmond Bane, 4.2 field goals or 4.3 field goals on 9.2 attempts. Duncan Robinson, overall, his shooting rates, he has shot, excuse me for 1 second. Duncan Robinson has shot 41.8% from the field, 38.6% from three, and 59.6% when it comes to true shooting. Desmond Bane, 46.7% from the field, 42.1% from three, and a 59.3% true shooting percentage. Now, it certainly should be mentioned that overall Duncan Robinson has taken over 8 threes per game. Duncan Robinson is the definition of a shooting specialist and is one of the best shooting specialists, not only to start out an NBA career, but in the NBA today. But while Desmond Bane may not necessarily have showed a peak of Duncan Robinson's so far in his career, being the younger player, he actually over the past year has been a more productive offensive player than Duncan Robinson. Due to the increased ability, well, at least he has this year, but he's on his way to being that. With how well he's developed as a scorer, he's a better three-level scorer than Duncan Robinson. And he also is putting up similar rates to Duncan Robinson, despite the fact that Desmond Bane has seen his overall level of, usage, his overall shooting volume nearly double this year compared to last year. I'm not saying that Desmond Bane is a better overall shooter than Duncan Robinson. He is so far this year, but what I am saying is that when you consider the all-around package of player and when you consider the all-around offensive ability as a scorer to support elite shooting, I think Desmond Bane right now at least is the better talent. And I do feel that he's shown that he has the ability to have a more sustainable chance of continuing to improve than Robinson. But that's the key, is the fact that through this year and over the next 2 seasons beyond that, Duncan Robinson is going to be owed $18 million for this year, plus each of the next 2 seasons. Desmond Bane is owed a total of $7 million over that same stretch. So I am in no way, shape, or form trying to take away from the success Duncan Robinson has had. But my point is to show, despite Desmond Bane being a breakout star, despite how special of a player he's turned into, Desmond Bane, it's not far-fetched to say, is one of the most valuable players in the NBA due to his contract and how much of an impactful shooter he has become. I know that is a truth that's been out there for a while, but you now have further validation. You now have a big enough sample size when it comes to Desmond Bane to truly understand not only how special he is, how impressive and impactful that he is, but also how valuable that he is. And the fact that he truly has stepped up, and despite Ja Morant and despite Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane now, over Dillon Brooks, in my opinion, though Dillon Brooks may be overall the third best player that the Grizzlies have right now, I think Desmond Bane is the third most important player for the Grizzlies to reach where they ultimately want to reach in the future as a championship contender. And so that's how impressive the first 100 games of Desmond Bane's career has been. He's not only turned into one of the best shooters in the NBA right now, he's had one of the most impressive shooting starts to a season in NBA history, and he also is clearly, in terms of contracts, one of the most valuable talents in the NBA. And the fact that this has happened in less than a calendar year with how condensed schedules have been due to COVID makes it even more impressive. So we've celebrated Desmond Bane now. It seems like after every single game, Desmond Bane is the one to talk about, and for good reason with how special he's been. But it's not just in terms of the Grizzlies. In terms of NBA history, there has rarely been a shooting talent seen or a player who has made an impact as a shooter like Desmond Bane has made for the Grizzlies. And though we've all been able to enjoy Mike Miller in the past be among the NBA's elite shooters at times, I don't think we've seen a player like Desmond Bane when it comes to his shooting ceiling. Desmond Bane is on track to not only surpass Mike Miller's franchise record of 201 threes, Desmond Bane is on track to surpass it significantly. He may have a legitimate shot at 250 threes this year. And if he does, I don't think at that point it's at all far-fetched to say he's the best shooter that has ever played for the Grizzlies. And ultimately, hopefully over the next decade, all of which hopefully will be in Memphis, he'll be among the NBA's best shooters on a consistent basis. It's been quite impressive to see, and it will all be lucky enough to continue to see not only Desmond Bane's elite production, but the combination of him and Ja Morant turning into one of the best young backcourt combinations in the NBA. Can't thank you enough for joining us here on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Make sure you check out myself at StatsSAC on Twitter, the show at Locked On Grizzlies, at Locked On Grizz on Twitter. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below. Check us out wherever podcasts are available as your first listen of the day. Can't thank you enough and hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.